The Olympics are finished. I figure we're going to be talking about the Olympics for at least 2 more weeks as they do breakdowns and results and things and fallout from the event. The first Lambda variant case has come to Japan. I'm going to learn a lot more Greek letters, I think, by the end of this whole coronavirus thing. It is officially connected to the Olympics. It was a little confusing because the lady went to Peru and then she arrived in Japan and she was obviously part of the Olympics somehow. I don't know if she was from Peru. That was the bit that was a bit, it wasn't clear if she was Japanese who went to Peru and came back, Peruvian who came from Peru to Japan, or someone who went to Peru as a like to visit and then came to the Olympics after. The interesting thing, so the Delta variant's in the news a lot. It is classified as a variant of concern. So it's much more communicable. You've probably heard about it. Lambda is not as bad, apparently. It is a variant of interest. I didn't know the classifications worked like that. So that was actually interesting. There was something I learned. Yes, I think I'm going to learn more Greek letters if this keeps going with more variants. I don't know how many Greek letters there are, which is an interesting thing to not know. And then what happens when they run out of Greek letters? Because I assume there's only like 6. The day after the Olympics finished, I think it was the 18th. That date is completely wrong because today is the 17th. Anyways, the day after the Olympics finished, International Olympic Committee, International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach was seen walking around Ginza, and then people ran up and they took pictures with him and stuff. This is despite the restrictions on athletes and officials. So they were trying to keep the Olympic bubble. The Olympic bubble, it was actually kind of a big deal because it was supposed to be keeping everyone safe. The Lambda case previously mentioned, we don't know if it was, kept within the bubble. She was, they found out she was sick at the airport and isolated her right away. So there is a hope that she just will be, it's isolated and won't actually get into Japan at large. The possibility that it has is pretty high, though. The president of the Olympics, who's supposed to be like in charge and making sure all this stuff happens, they actually deported 2 Ukrainian, I think, judo guys for breaking quarantine and going sightseeing, and someone from another country. So there's people got like in trouble and lost their opportunities to get like medals and stuff to compete in the Olympics because they broke this. And then this dude's just walking around. Now you could say the Olympics are finished. He said he's already stayed in Japan more than 14 days. So, he can't be sick or he can't be spreading it around. It's a bad look. And this is one of the problems is these guys who are in charge of things, they think they can do whatever they want. This has become sort of a refrain of Ninja News Japan, is these guys who are in charge of things, who think they're important, seem to think they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and everyone's going to love them for it. And then when it goes wrong, they don't seem to be, sure as to what to do. They don't understand that people don't see them as being special. I guess you surrounded yourself with yes men. This is sort of the Justin Bieber thing. I bet you didn't think I was going to start talking about Justin Bieber when I'm talking about the finish of the Tokyo Olympics. Neither did I. But I think it was Bill Burr was talking about it, and he was talking about how he was like 10 when he got famous, and he had more money than anyone else, like more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. He has everyone just telling him he's awesome. Everything he's ever done is awesome. Everything he's going to do is awesome. And he starts acting like a shithead when he's like 17, which is when kids start acting like shitheads. But normally, like when I was a shithead at 17, I got like put down or insulted or punished, whereas he doesn't. He gets told he's brilliant. So of course he's acting like a jerk. And then later when he's in his 20s and stuff, he starts pulling it back together, and people don't give him any credit for that. But actually it's probably way harder. But these presidents and stuff are similar in that they are surrounding themselves with people who tell them that everything they do is smart and I want to go for a walk in Ginza. And everyone's like, okay, well, let's arrange that for you. And then they do. And then it's like, why are all these people angry at me? That's just interesting. I've never lived that life. So, and I hope I never do, actually. I don't want to end up being that kind of dick. Okay, so this is a follow up on a previous story, the softball player and the mayor who bit her medal. We have the mayor of Nagoya. And the mayor of Nagoya, he said hello to this girl. He had her come to the thing. If you listen to last week's episode, I do the whole breakdown. So I don't want to do the whole thing. I don't know how much detail I should go into. So anyways, there was an official visit of the pitcher for the softball team. Some other things have come into view that made last week's story make a little more sense. For the softball team, and the mayor of Nagoya is like, hey, let me put on your medal. And she like plays along, she puts it on, and then he pulls down his mask and he bites it, which she laughed at, but everyone else was horrified by it. Now, when I did the story last week, it was only a day or two old. He'd already gotten 4,000 complaints about his behavior. That number has gone up to 7,000 complaints, and there's been a bit more fallout. He has offered to pay for a replacement medal. Now, it turns out the Olympic Committee is actually going to replace it. I don't know about free of charge to anybody. I mean, certainly they have to pay for it. But the Olympic Committee is going to replace the medal. He's also sorry for his comments that drew accusations of sexual harassment, which I had totally missed, to be honest. In the video, you don't really hear what he says, but apparently he said to this girl, "Are you prohibited from having romantic relationships?" He's 72 and she's 20. And this gets me off on, like, this dude is misfiring on every level you could possibly do. He's broken coronavirus, quarantine protocols. He's been gross. This is actually relates to the Justin Bieber thing, where he clearly thinks he can do whatever he wants and everyone's going to laugh and be happy and think he's brilliant. So he pulled down his mask and bit the medal, and the girl was very nice about it. She laughed along and didn't say anything at the time, but I'm sure she was horrified. He thought he was being really funny and smart. And of course, the 7,000 complaints make it pretty clear that he's not. He then decides, oh, here's a 20-year-old girl. Now, there is a possibility that, again, in the same vein, he thought he was being funny. I am not defending him. The mayor of Nagoya should not be hitting on, even in jest, 20-year-old Olympic athletes. He shouldn't be hitting on anybody. He's there in a professional capacity. But you can see he's trying to be funny. He's trying to be sort of coy. And he's an old man. And if you've listened to the last 6 months of News Japan, you know my opinion on old Japanese men being in charge of stuff. I didn't know about this actual comments. Are you prohibited from having romantic relationships? Is pretty gross. Yeah, I just couldn't, I can't conceive of how badly this guy's evening was when it all started coming to light. He's come out and he's given the very standard apology, but he's actually, I don't know. He says, I feel morally responsible, which is fair because he is. He is morally responsible. I disgraced the occasion. Yes, you absolutely did. You should not have. Again, last week I said, like, don't put your mouth on other people's stuff. That is true. Don't do that. And offended Goto. Goto is the girl who is won the Olympic medal. And the Japanese people. Yes, all of that is true. Now, last week I said it's weird that Toyota Corporation just chimed in out of nowhere. It was like, hey, Goto, mayor of Nagoya, dick move. That was I think, a lift quote from what I said last week, because that's just how I talk. I can actually probably replicate my own speech patterns pretty well. I guarantee I said dick move. I thought that was weird that Toyota Motor Corporation, just out of nowhere, apropos of nothing, made a comment. But it turns out there is a reason. And it's that Toyota owns the softball team that Goto plays for. So she is very technically a Toyota employee. I don't know how, it's sponsorship and stuff like that. So I don't know how direct it is. But the money that goes to her so that she can play softball, so she can win a medal, so that the mayor of Nagoya can slobber all over it with germs and then be like, I haven't been gross enough. Do you want to date me, lady who's 50 years younger than I am? That's Toyota's money in there somewhere. So they actually had some, right to make some sort of comment. The mayor, again, just saying sorry isn't enough in this case. He's going to give up 3 months' pay, which works out to 1.5 million yen. So we now know how much the mayor of Nagoya makes, 500,000 yen a month, which is a lot of money. It's one of those things it's like, rich guys get jobs where they make lots of money and then they have side hustles and stuff, passive income and whatnot. I'd like some of that. I think I could have handled this situation better than he did. I don't think I would have ended up having to apologize. I don't think I would have accidentally, I'm trying to think, if I did fake flirting, would it be seen as real? But then I think as soon as cameras were on me, I would be like, oh, I shouldn't fake flirt here and now. Which actually makes me sound like a bit of a predator because I know when not to do it, which probably means I shouldn't do it at all. I think I've just had a weird realization about how gross I am. Thank you, Mayor of Nagoya, for teaching me how gross I am. This is what podcasts are all about. It's about learning. So the coronavirus news. I'm just going to do one. We have already mentioned the Lambda variant has come to Japan via the Olympics. Of course, Suga said that didn't. The Olympics had no impact at all. So hopefully this Lambda variant doesn't do anything because that might prove the Prime Minister of Japan's comments to be facetious and incorrect and totally inappropriate, and we wouldn't want that. Serious corona cases have gone way up. Now, there was a guy in his 50s. He was at home. He had symptoms. 2 days later, he started having breathing problems. This is the big thing with the coronavirus, is the breathing problems. He calls for an ambulance and he gets taken to a hospital. This is actually contextually a story you will hear sooner or later if you spend any time in Japan. He was turned away from more than 120 hospitals. There are 11.4 times more cases compared to 1 month ago, which is before the Olympics. So after the Olympics arrived, now you could say correlation is not causation, which is true. But I think if you really studied this, since I predicted it and it happened, I feel very confident in my ability to say the Olympics somehow did have a negative impact on coronavirus cases. Especially 11.4 times more is a lot. But anyways, this guy's at home. He's having trouble breathing. He calls for an ambulance. He gets turned away by more than 120 hospitals. This is not an unique story. And it's shocking to anyone who lives in a country with hospitals because it's almost like most hospitals have a rule that you're not allowed to turn people away. But in Japan, what they're saying is we don't have the facilities. We can't take care of them. We can't do it. You have to take them somewhere else. It took 5 hours for him to get admitted into a hospital, which I actually started trying to do the math. Like, they didn't go to 120 hospitals in 5 hours. So they must have been in the in the ambulance calling hospitals, seeing where they could take him or something like that. It's just, we've heard about this story in several different ways. And this is something that, again, if you come to Japan, it's really shocking. Hospitals close. So if you get hurt sort of in off hours, most hospitals are actually closed. Like, you go in and no one will be there. And you'll be like, hey, where are the patients stuff? They're up on the second floor or third floor or something. They're somewhere else. But there's no staff in the front who will take care of you. And they will tell you to go somewhere else. So go to some big hospital that is open 24 hours, which is honestly quite rare. And the idea that, if you get hurt on the weekend, you have to wait till Monday to get help is pretty shocking. Especially, I am relatively pro Japanese healthcare. Like, the cost and stuff is low. I was sick back in February. I was in the hospital, paid a fraction of the cost, didn't make my family go broke. All these kind of things are all really good. Yeah, if you get hurt or sick during off hours, you may have, let's say you broke your arm, you may have to just wait a day to go to the hospital. And then they might have to like, because it's actually in a weird way started healing, you might have to like re-break the arm or reposition it. And it's like just way more painful and worse if you don't do it right away. So that's something you should know about. So unfortunately, this story is not the first time. It's not quite that shocking to me because it's not the first time I've heard this story about people being turned away from hospitals over and over and over again. We've had several stories where people were turned away from hospitals so much that they actually died. Now, this guy got into a hospital. So I guess that's a good thing. Yeah, when I'm getting all pro Japanese healthcare, which is pretty regular, because I'm always comparing it to the stories I hear in American healthcare where people just don't go to the hospital because they can't afford it. And then if they do go, they have no money left in their lives and they all go broke and die from something else. You can actually remind me of this one because this is one of the dark spots of Japanese healthcare is that you can get turned away from a hospital. Okay, we're getting into sort of lighter stories. I should do this one first because it's vaguely related. Fuji Rock Festival. It's a 3-day festival in Japan. It happens every year. It didn't happen last year because of coronavirus. And everyone's like, oh, this year we have to do it. And I was like, do you? Do you have to do it? Does it have to be done? Like, I'm sorry. I know I'm kind of a wet blanket here. But do you have to do it? So that's what the people who like put on this thing say. It has to be done. I'm assuming it's because that's their paycheck is why it has to be done, why it's really important. A 3-day festival seems like a really bad idea right now, as did the Olympics, which had no effect on the number of cases of coronavirus in Japan, which went up 11.4 times more in 1 month. They are trying to do something. They are sending a free PCR test to all ticket holders. So basically, it's going to arrive, today, August 17th. The PCR test should arrive. It's 3 days before the festival, which actually is really bad timing because it's just raining constantly right now in Japan. And they're going to have limited admission for social distancing, which I can see as being completely ineffective. Because a festival concert, people show up to the stage and they crowd up the front. Having less people just means if you push up to the front, you're more likely to be able to get to the front. So I don't see how that's actually going to work out. But this is one of those things. It's okay. Basically, you take the PCR test. You have to have the positive test to bring, or do you? It actually just said it's sending it to them so you can check. So I guess if you find out you have coronavirus, you're not going to go to the festival like a responsible citizen. I had several conversations on Ninja News Japan about responsible citizens and how they don't tend to be responsible. It's the irresponsible ones who are going to buy a ticket to the Fuji Rock Festival and who are then going to get a test and it says positive and they're going to be like, well, I don't feel bad, so I'm going to go anyways, and then become a super spreader event. I, right now, would not buy a ticket to a festival. Now I'm claiming, in a way to be a responsible citizen. I'm just not the kind of person who would go to a rock festival anyway. I have passed up opportunities to do things because of, I don't really go to restaurants anymore other than a few set ones I go to at lunch at work. But like I was out with a friend and I was like, I don't want to go to a restaurant because actually right now it's summer vacation. It's called Obon. That's when restaurants are really full and I don't want to go there. And I was, bit of a party pooper, Peter Party Pooper. I'm concerned about the Fuji Rock Festival. It'll be interesting. What I want to see is after it's finished, how they handled it. Like, how did they maintain social distancing in a crowd format? So my first idea is they put the squares on the ground and you have to stand in your square. That's possibly functional. And if everyone did take their PCR test and it was all negative, that actually would be at least a step in the right direction. I was interested, how did they get so many PCR tests? Because when Corona happened, I guess when it starts, no one's ready. But it's one of those things like when it happens, you don't have PCR tests ready. One of the biggest complaints about Japan is just not testing. And so if they're not testing, you don't know how many cases there are. So that was actually one of the arguments from a lot of people was like, cases are low in Japan, but we're not testing, so we don't actually know if that's true. I hope Fuji Rock Festival goes well. but I am pessimistic about it. We got some space stories. And I love space. I would like to go to space. So all these rich people going to space right now, I mean, I wasn't jealous of them, but I would like to go. And then I saw the price tags on those tickets and stuff to go to space is ridiculous. No normal person can go, but at the same time, people going to space is cool. Tenga, I've actually mentioned the Tenga rocket before. And it turns out that the Tenga mission to space is multiphasic, which I think is kind of interesting because it actually sounded like better organized than a lot of other space missions and stuff that's been going on. There are 3 parts. Now, at first, news report I read said that they were just going to shoot their mascot into space, which seemed like a massive waste of time. Then the second thing I read was that they're actually sending up devices to measure changes so that they can make a better masturbatory aid for people who are in space. Number 1. So there's 3 phases. Number 1 is they're going to gather the thoughts and wishes from 1,000 people and shoot them into space in a Tenga-shaped pod. Now, at first I thought like shooting, I assume, bits of paper into space seems like a waste. I wouldn't bother doing that myself. I'm not superstitious though. The idea of having something in space is kind of cool, but just shooting some thoughts and wishes into space, it's about as effective as putting thoughts and wishes on Facebook. So whatever. I think they were doing this to try to get other people interested. I would not want my hopes and dreams in a Tenga-shaped pod. That is actually maybe the bigger issue. Is I hope for some form of world peace and for humanity to evolve to the next great civilization and break the barriers of the earth and become spacefaring and stuff. It sort of loses a bit of its gravitas if it's in a Tenga-shaped pod. If you know what a Tenga-shaped pod is. The Tenga shape is pretty classic because you actually see it. They actually advertise quite heavily because I actually knew what it was before I knew the name of the company. And it's got a bulbous top and then like a shaft. And it's a masturbatory aid for men. So I think you can figure out how it works. Phase 2, the Tenga Robo, which is the mascot. The Tenga Robo and Egg Dog. They have an egg. It's like a silicone thing. It's also a masturbatory aid. Will be shot into space to return back to Earth. Since they will return outside of the ship or the rocket or whatnot, I don't think they're going to return successfully. I think the intent is that they burn up in the atmosphere. So again, symbolically, we've taken our logo, our mascot, brought it to space, and then in the most dramatic fashion, burned it up as it came back to Earth. Did not seem like the most thought through set of symbols to me. Then we get the third one, which is actually the actual mission that they're doing. Tenga measuring devices for research to assess the changing conditions in space. And this will help them develop a new device that can be used in space. So that's, I actually think the third one is necessary as we get people who are going to basically be on the space, because the International Space Station has some Russian dudes who've been out there for like a year and stuff. As this happens more and more and more, you're going to need people to have to take care of their more base needs. And I think that's important. It's important to be honest about that, because if you do that, then you're going to have less problems overall. Then we get to Japan. They want to, by March of next year, research how to create a sustainable food source on the moon. Now, there are several companies involved with this, along with the government. It's kind of government funded, but it's Space Food Sphere, which is a company I've never heard of. Ajinomoto, which basically makes spices and stuff. NTT, which is a communications company, and a BioVenture Eugelana. My writing is so poor I can't tell if that's an L or a C. Anyways, these companies are coming together. They're trying to get some way to make food on the moon, and this is for long-term space missions, primarily lunar missions, because then, you have to go to space, you go to the moon. They were talking about sending more people to the moon, I think this year or next year, and now that's not going to happen, or 2024, which is too bad. I think the world needs to see something like rich people going to space wasn't quite as inspiring as maybe those rich people thought. I think astronauts going to the moon to do like real science stuff, I think that would be better. I think that would be more in line with sort of the inspirational aspects of what space travel could be. Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos going to space and coming back and claiming to be the first one to do something. I don't give a shit. That does not inspire me at all. This is the last one. It's very, very technical news. It's good if you live in Japan. From October 2021, companies will no longer be able to lock SIM cards. Now, if you come to Japan, you will notice that everything is locked. Japan loves getting everything locked into their own ecosystem. And it's actually a very constant struggle to not get locked into some sort of company's ecosystem exclusively. It's kind of like the Apple idea where you don't want peripherals to match with anything else. So you have to buy all Apple stuff, and then all Apple things connect to all other Apple things. And then you end up with just all Apple stuff and nothing else. Apple is really against universal like USB connectors like USB-C, because that would mean I could connect other things to their devices, and that would be a problem. Japanese phone companies try to lock you in, and if you wanted out of it, if you wanted to unlock your SIM card, just to say for travel, they would basically like make you pay the full cost of your phone, because usually you pay that off like month by month. Pay the full cost of your phone, pay for service fees and stuff like that. They were just making it as difficult as possible, as expensive as possible. Now it's going to be easier to switch networks. So this was actually something that I never found hard to do, because I would wait till I fully paid my phone. My wife and I weren't happy with the phones we had, so we were going to go get new ones. We went and were like, give us a good deal. And they were like, no. So we quit them and then went to a different provider who, because we were technically new customers, were like, we'll give you all this stuff. So actually our plan was, before this, to just switch companies, because there's like 4 or 5 main companies. We were just going to switch company to company and then get the benefits of being a new customer. But if you keep your phone for like 2-3 years, you're talking somewhere between 10 and 15 years of benefits before you actually have to go back to one of the companies that you quit before. And a returning customer doesn't get the benefits, but you never got any benefits anyway. So there was no, like, that wasn't a threat. It'll be easier to switch networks. It'll be easier to reuse your device. So if I have my phone and I was like, oh, I still actually want to keep my phone, but I want to change to another carrier, I can just swap out my SIM card. The problem, if you have your current contract, it will last until 2023, October. So that's the only sort of downside, is if you're in a contract now, that contract is valid until it basically runs out, or 2023, which I think is sort of getting to the long end of a contract anyways, before you would have to renew. If you are into cell phones and stuff, and I'm into sort of all kinds of technology, I've been looking at the flip phones, the flip smartphones, not the foldable ones that get big and wide. I've been looking at the flip one, the old Motorola style. I kind of want one of those, but I'm wondering how small it is. So I keep my phone in my pocket. If it's fatter and smaller, that's actually no benefit. I actually would prefer thinner, but I think I might have to wait a couple generations before they actually hit that.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or anywhere you get podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube/Velocipodcast or streaming on twitch.tv/chunkmcbeefchest. You can find Ninja News Japan on Facebook. Send questions or comments to speakpipe.com/Velocipodcast for your first step to fame. Not the good kind, the fleeting pointless kind. Link in the description. Check out all the podcasts in the Velocipodcast family. See McBee, Ninja News Japan, and Daily Affirmations Weekly. And remember, don't put your mouth on other people's stuff. It may cost you 1.5 million yen, and people will still be angry at you. Sexy out, homies.
And they went, I made my bed and it looked nice. Having my bed in the background means what a dick. So he's just curled up the cover that I had put down quite nicely, so he can lay with a bump under his stomach or something. Okay, whatever. As long as he's quiet. Start again. Thomas Bach. So the Olympics. I got to start from the very beginning.